Hi, everyone. Today, I'm going to be summarizing or give you kind of my takeaways and my thoughts on this new and exciting paper from Glowkill et al. And they are proposing this multi token prediction as a way to train more sample efficient large language models. And we will touch on that and what that means. And there are a ton of interesting results. We will cover some of the more interesting ones and what this could potentially mean for the future of LLMs, right? So we know that large language models have different challenges, and one of those being the sample efficiency, but also if you are going to propose an approach or an approach to do language modeling, right? So the traditional way that we do that today is doing this next token prediction. If you're going to propose a method, right, you need to be able to do experiments that assesses the robustness of that approach. And this is one of the reasons I like this paper and I wanted to cover it. I think it's a great example of how to perform experiments and how to think out of the box in terms of how to test the robustness of an approach. There are a lot of exciting results. And what this paper proposes here is they're trying to basically train large language models to predict multiple future tokens at once. And they're claiming that this, again, results in higher sample efficiency. And specifically, this particular training paradigm here or approach is asking the model to predict the following n tokens using n independent heads operating on top of a shared model trunk. And this is a transformer model trunk that we're using here. So we're going to get into those details as we go through the paper. But the idea is that we have these output heads that are independent and right, they have the ability to predict multiple tokens as opposed to just predicting one. And by predicting, training this model to be able to predict multiple tokens, we can improve right results on some benchmarks, but also it shows that it can create speed up of up to 3x, I believe. Right here, they report that. So there's a lot of details here that I'm going to skip because I am going to be focusing more on the important parts. Now, as for results, right, they have a 13 billion parameter model that they train with this approach, and it solves 12% more problems on human eval and 17% more on MBPP benchmark than comparable next token models, right? So they are actually comparing with these traditional way of how we this autoregressive language models, so Llama, GPT, and so on and so forth. But something interesting about the size selection here, actually with this approach, what they showed is that, and you can see here in the chart, I'm jumping to this right away. As you increase the model size, you can see here we go from 0.3 billion to 13 billion. You can see how it significantly improves the results, right? And on this particular benchmark, now these benchmarks, I should have said that they are more around code generation, right? And the trying to assess the code generation capabilities of LLMs, right? They're very popular and they are used heavily in LLM research. And so that's kind of exciting to see. And what we will do is we will jump on or touch on a few things that are kind of interesting in this paper. Now, if you want to understand a little bit on the actual multi-token prediction approach, right? They mentioned that during training, the model predicts 4 future tokens at once, right? So you're getting that at once. Now, when you're doing inference, you essentially what you do here, and they mention it here, they employ only the next token output head, right? But they have the option also to use the other 3 heads as well. And this gives you a speed up inference time, right? So this goes up to 3x, I believe that's what they report. That's exciting, I think, the result, because you get all of these benefits in one shot. Now, I think I would say before I go into all the different aspects of this paper that this is a very promising approach. No, the results that you see are more centered around these common benchmarks. Now, how does this translate to real world capabilities? And that's something we're going to discuss and the implication of that. Now, there's a whole section here on the methodology. You can read more about that, the laws. This is very common. I'm not going to go through the math. This is just for review. But they also have the kind of changes that they made on this particular model. And you can see here that they end up with this multi-token prediction cross entropy loss, and they define it And you can see that this architecture in particular uses a shared transformer trunk, which produces the hidden representation, right, from the observed context. And you can see context is common with language model. And then it has n independent output heads implemented in terms of the transformer layers and a shear on embedding matrix. So you can look at it. There's a summary of that here in this particular figure, and this will give you. It even has a little bit of code here on exactly what is happening here and during this training process. Now, something that they highlight here is this memory efficient implementation, right? So there is a bottleneck here, and the bottleneck is that the logit vectors, right, become the GPU memory usage bottleneck, right? You have a huge vocabulary and so on, so those dimensions are kind of increasing. What they have done is they are proposing a way to kind of deal with this, and you can read more about how they do it here. But the way I understood what they're doing in this paper is that they figured out a way to leverage this shared trunk, right? So they have a shared trunk here, and they sequentially compute the forward and backward pass of each independent output head. So you might be asking, how do they deal with these output heads? There are a couple of them. In this case, they're referring to 4 as a number, and we will get into why they actually chose 4, because they show in the experiments that's kind of an ideal number for this setup. You can see here that the way this is done is sequentially, right? 1, 2, 3. We have a loss, goes back into the head, goes back in the shear trunk, and then it goes in a sequential way, right? That forward and backward pass. And it's accumulating gradients at the trunk, right? The trunk is really tying things up together. Okay, and you can see how they managed to reduce GPU memory utilization here. And for inference, right, they're using, I did think, yeah, they mentioned it here, they're using self-speculative decoding method for the next token prediction, and the multi-token prediction, which leads to, again, it leads to being able to utilize, right, all that capability that you're getting from training on multiple tokens at inference time. So they report some results on that. I believe the main number that they share is that they get up to 3x speed up on when you're using, right, as it mentioned in the first figure here, when they use the other 3 heads as opposed to just using one, the standard setting. There are a lot of experiments. I'm going to highlight a few of these before finalizing the video here, which were interesting to me. Again, I am coming from a application developer. How might this be interesting for someone like me that develops applications on top of large language models? I'm also a researcher, but I'm trying to just gain insights from the research that's happening and the trends and see how I can translate that into production ready systems. And so what I will do is I will highlight a few of the results that are interesting, but there is a lot of results in this paper. And this is remarkable because you don't typically see papers today highlighting so many different aspects of these models or assessing different aspects of the model. So that's really cool. And you can see that different insights are coming out. So what's interesting here, this first figure here, you can see the results on N token prediction models and MBPP. Again, we're using this benchmark here, and by model size. So this shows again what the trend is as the model scales, right? You get this kind of boost in performance on both of these code generation benchmarks. So that shows consistency there. And you want to see that, right? You want to see consistent and stable results when you're developing newer approaches for doing language modeling specifically. Okay, so that's the benefit of scale with model size. Faster inference, again, it touches on the greedy self-speculative decoding, and they observe a speed up of 3.0x here on code with an average of 2.5 accepted tokens. You can take a look at the table here. I won't go through it, but you can just take a look at if you want, interested in this particular part. I think this is the part that we are most interested in because, again, when you think about, you're doing multiple token prediction, you are considering more future tokens, the first thing you think is, okay, this is going to be an inefficient approach. It's going to be computationally intensive. But it turns out that at inference time, you can leverage those heads, can do prediction of 4 tokens at once. This is the reason why I think I got excited about it when I saw it the first time. This table just introduces or presents a few results. They have like byte level models as well. You can see you can get this one consistently at n equal 8 consistently gets better performance compared to the other ones. But the ones I'm interested to see is the actual models trained on 200 billion tokens and one on 1 trillion tokens, which is now more common, right? And these ones have vocabulary of 32K tokens. They try different n values. So you can see that for using 4, and this is why they use 4 as the common example across the paper, that it provided the best results, right? This setting here. So this is for searching for the optimal n, and you can see how n equal 4 usually provided the better results. There is obviously an exception here with this particular benchmark, which is another code generation type of benchmark. You can see that this one with n equals 6 actually provided good results, but it seems that this one is also acceptable in terms of the performance there. All right, so one interesting aspect of this paper that I really liked as I read through it is the fact that, again, they focus on different aspects of language models and the different challenges. And right now there's a lot of conversation about these models having constraint to understand, history, right? Understand context, right? And understand not only local patterns, but understand global patterns as well. And that's very important because there's a lot of semantics that might be hidden and that are important, right? As the language model is generating tokens that might be missed in that generation process. So by considering future tokens, you might be able to, gain and be able to build a system that can understand more global patterns and learn global patterns. So that's what they kind of talk about here in this particular section. So you can read more about that and kind of the results that they're reporting. I thought this was an interesting one. Because again, they mention it at the beginning here as one of the motivations, right? Not only do they want to train a system that can have good reasoning capabilities and so on, right? And can acquire language and world knowledge and so on. This is what we're interested in. But at the same time, we also want something that can, deal with these issues of just focusing on local patterns. And we know also that next token prediction, based on some kind of experiments that have been reported, that they overlook hard decisions as well, right? So there's a lot of these challenges. While these systems are already very capable, there are all of these little things that we kind of sort of need to look at more closely. And this paper does a good job at that. This particular one is training on multiple epochs. So there's also another kind of idea as well on how to effectively train large language models. If you have been following the research around LLMs, there's also this idea that you can train LLMs more optimally if you consider doing more epochs. And a few research labs have shown that you can do so effectively. So the question is, can this multi-token prediction setting be helpful and kind of is suitable when you're implementing multiple epochs? It turns out that yes, they do that. And they do show that they have some, they get some performance improvements when they test it out in their different benchmarks that they're using. Okay, so they do show that as well. Not only do we want to learn global patterns, not only do we want the systems to be good at inference time, not only do we want the systems to be efficient at training time, not only do we want the systems to be able to used in different ways, like training using multiple epochs, and also fine-tuning these models, right? Because so far there's our conversations about where might fine-tuning fit, but a lot of developers and companies are using fine-tuned models. So if this was made available, can we fine-tune a multi-token predictor, right? The model that has been trained using this new setting of multi-token prediction. So they do show that, and a couple of results stand out here. You can see here they make a comparison of fine-tuning performance on Code Contest. So Code Contest is it's an excellent benchmark as well. It's actually one of the harder benchmarks. But they show that consistently, if they're using the setting of n equal 4, how that outperforms just the normal setting where you're just doing next token prediction. That's basically what this one is saying. And I think this particular sentence actually summarizes that. Also, they wanted to test, because so far we have spoken about the coding benchmarks, but we want to talk also about the natural language benchmark specifically. And as I read through the paper, it got really interesting because they show that it regresses, right? When you're using this multi-token training with the 7B models, it doesn't improve performance on choice tasks, or these multiple choice tasks. And something they highlight here is that some of these benchmarks might not be suitable. There might not be like leveraging generative capabilities of language models well. So we probably don't think that this is the right way to test the performance of these models. And I appreciate that kind of transparency and the fact that their authors actually reported that result here. And what they do is they try to use something like summarization. So specifically what they highlighted here was the use of the abstractive text summarization task, and they chose, a couple of benchmarks for that. And they show in this setting that, this has a lot of potential, right? So n equal 4 setting here, you can see how this one is performing a bit better, and more stable results, right? As the trading tokens increases. There's also some other theoretical stuff as well that might be interesting, like the induction capability of the multi-token prediction models. There's some more ablations on the synthetic data as well. Again, the induction capability, they discuss more of that here. There's also another polynomial arithmetic task. That's another complex task, so to speak, that you can test models with. And again, they're showing really good results with n equal 4 setting. But you can check it out, and they have settings like in domain and out of domain. But I will leave that out of this video because I want to keep it as short as possible. And then again, the algorithmic reasoning, which is something they highlighted that these models have. They're better at algorithmic reasoning. I think it makes sense, because I think doing this multi-token prediction might have good benefits for tasks that require these models to look at longer patterns, the semantics, the long-term setting. And they also go into like why it works, some speculation about it. I think that this was an interesting one as well. According to the authors, the intuition is that multi-token prediction mitigates the distributional discrepancy between training time teacher forcing and inference time autoaggressive generation. They also talk about this idea of choice points. You can take a look at this as well. So choice points might be, areas that the model, struggles with, right? Or maybe these next token prediction are ignoring this particular challenging transitions of sequences, and these particular models are able to handle that well or promote better learning of these particular transitions. So they talk about an example here. You can see the ground truth 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, A, B. So this particular transition here might be a little bit harder to catch with just normal, standard next token prediction. But if you have a multi-token prediction setting, you might be able to capture those because there's, again, what I mentioned was it's able to promote that, the ability to learn that, because it leverages, it correlates 3A and 5 to C. So 3A and 5 to C, okay, in the data. Again, because it's looking at future tokens. And they go into like kind of the weights associated with it and so forth, right? But I think this is the overall summary of that. And they believe that the quality of text generations depends on picking the right decisions at choice points. Those choice points are really important. And that end token prediction losses promote those, right? Promote learning those. Really enjoyed this paper. I think the main takeaway I would say, without spending too much more time here, is that you have a potential alternative way of training these large language models, right? And getting all these different benefits, right? Without any kind of additional computational overhead, right? If that makes sense. So it's like you get better inference, you get better results, and you get all these other benefits. And you can see how they looked at, for instance, one of the areas we will have to take a little bit a closer look at is this idea of learning global patterns, because I think that's where this particular approach might be very, very very interesting to apply. The other stuff like multiple epochs, fine tuning, and so on, I think those are kind of standard experiments that we will also, I think, have more discussions around as we progress with these ideas and how to improve large language model training and so on. But I think those were kind of the areas that I wanted to highlight. And obviously, faster inference as well. But overall, the idea that this model can be more sample efficient even while using, more feature tokens, I think that's a really cool idea, and that's what this paper essentially proposed. So that will be it for this video. Hopefully you like the style that I'm presenting these. Again, as I mentioned, I am a researcher, but I'm also building applications on top of large language models and helping companies do that. So I regularly try to keep up with, what are the latest ideas, what could be the latest trends that we can bring into like in a production setting. And I think this paper presented a few things that highlight or maybe emphasize on where kind of the field is moving towards. Consider leaving a like. I'll appreciate that. And let me know in the comments if you have any questions, if you have any other paper ideas that you want me to give you my takes on as well. I'm happy to do that. I already got some requests from some of you And yeah, I totally appreciate that. So, and subscribe to the channel if you think these are interesting. That will kind of give me a signal as to whether this is interesting for this community. Thanks and have a good day.